Hi everyone, I, 28F, need some advice about a situation with my husband Donald, 30M, and his best friend Simon, 29M. We've been married for 5 years and have a 3-year-old daughter, Brooke. Donald and I met in college. We were both studying business and had several classes together. At first, we were just friends, but over time, our relationship grew into something more. Donald was funny, smart, and ambitious. He had big dreams of starting his own company someday. I admired his drive and determination. We started dating in our junior year and things moved quickly. By the time we graduated, we were talking about marriage. Donald proposed on a weekend trip to the beach, and of course, I said yes. We were young and in love, and we thought we could conquer the world together. Simon has been a part of Donald's life since high school. They played football together and have been inseparable ever since. When Donald introduced me to Simon, I could see why they were such good friends. Simon was outgoing and charismatic, always the life of the party. He made everyone around him laugh and have a good time. At first, I liked Simon. He was fun to be around and seemed genuinely happy for Donald and me. He was the best man at our wedding and gave a heartfelt speech about how Donald was like a brother to him. I thought it was sweet how close they were. After we got married, Donald and I both landed jobs at the same marketing firm. We were excited to start our careers together. For the first couple of years, everything was great. We were working hard, saving money, and enjoying our life as newlyweds. Simon was still a big part of our lives, often coming over for dinner or joining us for weekend outings. When I got pregnant with Brooke, Donald was thrilled. He was so excited to become a father. During my pregnancy, he was attentive and supportive. He came to every doctor's appointment and helped prepare the nursery. Simon even threw us a baby shower, which I thought was incredibly thoughtful. Brooke was born, and our lives changed dramatically. The first few months were a whirlwind of sleepless nights and adjusting to parenthood. Donald took paternity leave and was a hands-on dad from the start. I was impressed by how naturally he took to fatherhood. But as Brooke got older and the novelty of having a new baby wore off, I started to notice changes in Donald. He seemed restless and frustrated. He complained about the lack of sleep and how we never had time for ourselves anymore. I tried to be understanding, knowing that the transition to parenthood was difficult for many couples. That's when Simon started becoming more of a presence in our lives again. He would invite Donald out for drinks after work, saying Donald needed to decompress from the stresses of being a new dad. At first, it was just once a week or so, and I didn't mind. I thought it might be good for Donald to have some time to relax. But over time, these outings became more frequent. Donald started coming home later and later, often smelling of alcohol. When I asked him about it, he'd brush it off, saying he was just having a few beers with Simon and the guys. I tried to talk to Donald about my concerns. I told him that while I understood he needed some time to himself, I felt like he was neglecting his responsibilities at home. Brooke was growing so fast, and I didn't want him to miss out on important moments. Donald would apologize and promise to do better, but nothing ever changed. As the months went by, Donald's behavior got worse. He was going out with Simon 3 to 4 nights a week, often not coming home until 2 or 3 a.m. He'd be hungover most mornings and started calling in sick to work. I was left to do all the childcare and household chores while Donald was out partying. I tried talking to Donald about it again, but he just got defensive. He said I was being controlling and that he was allowed to have fun with his friends. He accused me of trying to change him and said I knew who he was when I married him. But the Donald I first married wasn't like this. The Donald I first married was responsible and family-oriented. This new Donald seemed more interested in reliving his college days with Simon than in being a husband and father. I started to resent Simon's influence on Donald. Whenever Simon was around, Donald would act differently. He'd be louder, more reckless, almost like he was trying to impress Simon. I tried to talk to Simon about it once, asking him to maybe encourage Donald to come home earlier or drink less. Simon just laughed it off, saying I needed to loosen up and let Donald have some fun. The situation came to a head last week. Donald went out with Simon on Friday night and didn't come home at all. I was worried sick, calling and texting him all night with no response. Brooke kept asking for her daddy, and I didn't know what to tell her. Donald finally stumbled in Saturday afternoon, reeking of alcohol. When I confronted him about where he'd been, he got angry. He said I was nagging him and that he was sick of me trying to control his life. We had a huge fight, with Brooke crying in the background. Donald stormed out again, saying he needed to clear his head. I called Simon to see if he knew where Donald was. Simon laughed it off and said Donald was blowing off some steam and would be home later. I was furious that Simon seemed to think this behavior was okay. I asked him how he'd feel if he had a wife and child waiting at home while he was out partying. Simon just said I didn't understand guy friendships and hung up on me. On Sunday, Donald finally came home. He apologized for disappearing and promised it wouldn't happen again. He said he loved me and Brooke and wanted to make things right. I wanted to believe him, but I'd heard these promises before. Sure enough, just 2 days later, Donald was out with Simon again. When he came home, he acted like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just broken the promise he made 2 days ago. I'm at my wit's end. I love Donald and I want our marriage to work, but I can't keep living like this. I feel like I'm raising Brooke alone while Donald relives his glory days with Simon. Simon seems to have no regard for Donald's family responsibilities, and Donald doesn't seem to care either. I've suggested that Donald cut back on time with Simon, but he accuses me of trying to control his friendships. He says Simon is like a brother to him and he won't cut him out of his life. I'm not asking him to end the friendship, just to find a better balance between his friend and his family. I'm also worried about the example Donald is setting for Brooke. She's young, but she's starting to notice when Daddy isn't around. I don't want her to think it's normal for a father to be absent or for a husband to treat his wife this way. I've thought about leaving Donald, but the idea of breaking up our family breaks my heart. I always imagined we'd grow old together, watching our children grow up and having a house full of grandkids someday. Now I'm not sure if that future is even possible. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just a phase Donald is going through. Maybe once Simon settles down with someone, things will change. But another part of me feels like I'm being taken advantage of, like Donald is choosing his friendship with Simon over his marriage and child. I've tried talking to my friends about it, but they all have different opinions. Some say I should leave Donald, that I deserve better. Others say I should stick it out, that marriage is about working through tough times. My mom says I should try to be more understanding of Donald's need for male bonding time, but I don't think she really understands how bad things have gotten. I'm also worried about the financial implications if I do decide to leave. Donald and I both contribute to our household income, and I'm not sure I could afford to support Brooke on my own. The thought of going through a custody battle terrifies me. Am I overreacting here? How can I get Donald to see that his behavior is hurting our family? Should I confront Simon directly about his influence on Donald? Is there any way to save my marriage, or am I fighting a losing battle? I don't want to be the nagging wife, but I also don't want to sit back while my husband chooses partying over his family. I feel lost and alone, and I could really use some advice. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? How did you handle it? Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since my original post, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Thank you all for your advice and support. Your comments gave me the courage to confront Donald about his behavior and how it was affecting our family. I decided to wait until we had a quiet moment at home. Brooke was in bed, and Donald had just gotten home from work. I asked him to sit down with me because we needed to talk. At first, Donald was defensive. He asked if I was going to nag him again about going out with Simon. I took a deep breath and told him this wasn't about nagging. It was about our family and the future of our marriage. I laid everything out for him, how his behavior was affecting me, how it was affecting Brooke, how I felt like I was losing the man I married. I told him about Brooke asking where he was all the time, about how lonely and overwhelmed I felt trying to manage everything on my own. At first, Donald tried to brush it off. He said I was exaggerating, that he wasn't out that much. But I had been keeping track. I showed him the calendar where I'd marked every night he'd been out late with Simon over the past few months. Seeing it all laid out like that seemed to shock him. That's when Donald finally opened up. He confessed that he'd been struggling with depression for months. He said he felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of being a husband and father. Going out with Simon was his way of escaping, of feeling like his old self again. I was stunned. Donald had always seemed so confident and put together. I had no idea he was struggling so much. He said he was afraid of being a failure as a husband and father, that he didn't know how to handle the pressure of providing for a family. Donald broke down crying, saying he knew his behavior was hurting us but he didn't know how else to cope. He admitted that he'd been thinking about quitting his job because he felt like he couldn't handle the stress anymore. I was shocked by this revelation. Donald had always been so career-driven. I asked him why he hadn't told me any of this before. He said he was ashamed, that he thought I'd think less of him if I knew he was struggling. We talked for hours that night. Donald admitted that Simon had been encouraging his behavior, telling him that he needed to live it up before he got tied down with family life for good. Simon, being single, didn't understand the responsibilities Donald had. Donald agreed to see a therapist to work on his depression and stress management. He also promised to cut back on the partying and spend more time at home. We made a plan together. Donald would limit his nights out with Simon to once a week, and we'd set up a weekly date night for just the two of us. For a week, things seemed to be improving. Donald was home every night, helping with Brooke and trying to reconnect with me. He started seeing a therapist, and seemed to be taking it seriously. I began to feel hopeful that we could work things out. But then, everything changed again. Simon showed up at our door one night, clearly drunk. He started yelling at Donald, saying he was weak for letting me control him. Simon said some nasty things about me and our marriage, calling me a ball and chain and saying I was ruining Donald's life. I was upstairs with Brooke when I heard the commotion. I came down to find Donald and Simon in a physical altercation. They were shoving each other, and Simon was trying to drag Donald out of the house. I yelled at them to stop and threatened to call the police. Simon finally left, but not before warning Donald that he was making a big mistake by choosing me over their friendship. After Simon left, Donald was visibly shaken. That's when he admitted something that floored me. Donald confessed that Simon had been pressuring him to leave me for months. Apparently, Simon had introduced Donald to a woman at one of their nights out, someone he thought would be more fun for Donald than me. Donald swore he had never considered leaving me or being unfaithful, but the fact that he had kept this from me for so long felt like a huge betrayal. I asked Donald why he hadn't told me about this before. He said he was afraid it would cause problems between us, that he thought he could handle Simon on his own. But it was clear now that Simon's influence was more damaging than either of us had realized. Now I'm torn. On one hand, I'm glad Donald is finally being honest with me and seeking help for his depression. I want to support him through this difficult time. On the other hand, I'm angry that he let things get this far and kept Simon's true nature hidden from me for so long. Donald has promised to cut all contact with Simon, but I'm not sure I can trust him after all the lies. He's deleted Simon's number from his phone and blocked him on social media, but part of me wonders if he'll keep that promise when things get tough again. I'm also worried about Simon's reaction to being cut off. Given his behavior at our house, I'm concerned he might try to cause more problems for us. Should I be worried about our safety? Should I consider getting a restraining order against Simon? Part of me wants to work on our marriage. I still love Donald, and I want to believe that the man I married is still in there somewhere. I want to support him through his depression and help him become the husband and father I know he can be. But another part of me wonders if too much damage has been done. Can I ever trust Donald again after he kept such big secrets from me? How do I know he won't fall back into old patterns the next time he's feeling stressed or overwhelmed? I'm also worried about the impact all of this is having on Brooke. She's too young to understand what's going on, but I know she can sense the tension in the house. How do I protect her from all of this? I don't know what to do next. Should I give Donald another chance? Can our marriage survive this betrayal? How can I support Donald's mental health without sacrificing my own well-being and that of our daughter? I'm lost and could really use some advice. Has anyone else dealt with a spouse's depression and destructive friendships? How did you handle it? Is it possible to rebuild trust after something like this? Any insights would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and the situation has taken another dramatic turn. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support. Your insights have been invaluable as I navigate this difficult situation. After the incident with Simon, Donald seemed committed to working on our marriage. He was going to therapy regularly, spending more time at home, and seemed to be making a real effort to reconnect with Brooke and me. He even started helping more around the house and taking Brooke to the park on weekends to give me some time to myself. For a few weeks, I thought we might actually be able to move past everything and rebuild our relationship. Donald was more attentive and communicative than he had been in months. We were having real conversations again, not just arguing or giving each other the silent treatment. But then I discovered something that changed everything. I was using Donald's laptop to pay some bills when I accidentally opened his email. What I saw made me feel sick. There were dozens of emails between Donald and Simon, dating back months. As I read through them, I felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. It turns out Donald hadn't cut contact with Simon at all. They had been in constant communication, and the content of their messages was shocking. They were planning weekend trips together, talking about women they met at clubs, and Simon was constantly encouraging Donald to leave me. Even worse, I found messages where Donald was complaining about me and Brooke, saying we were holding him back from living the life he wanted. He talked about feeling trapped in our marriage and wondering if he had settled down too young. In one particularly hurtful email, Donald said he sometimes wished he had never become a father. I confronted Donald as soon as he got home from work. At first, he tried to deny it, saying I must have misunderstood what I saw. But when I showed him the emails, he broke down. He admitted that he had been lying about cutting contact with Simon. He said he felt torn between his family and the freedom Simon represented. Donald tried to explain that he didn't really mean the things he said in the emails, that he was just venting to Simon in moments of frustration. But I couldn't unhear the hurtful things he had said about me and our daughter. How could he say he wished he'd never become a father? How could he talk about Brooke like she was a burden? I asked Donald why he had lied about cutting contact with Simon. He said he was afraid of losing his best friend, that Simon had been there for him long before I came into the picture. He said he thought he could maintain the friendship without it affecting our marriage, but he realized now that was naive. Donald begged for another chance, saying he would really cut ties with Simon this time. He offered to let me change all his passwords and check his phone whenever I wanted. He said he would do whatever it took to regain my trust. But I don't think I can believe him anymore. How can I trust anything he says when he's been lying to me for so long? The progress I thought we had made over the past month feels like a lie. Was he just pretending to be committed to our marriage while secretly planning weekends away with Simon? I asked Donald to leave the house for a few days while I figure out what to do. He's staying with his parents, and I've been trying to shield Brooke from what's happening as much as possible. But she keeps asking where Daddy is, and I don't know what to tell her. I'm angry, hurt, and confused. Part of me wants to try to salvage our marriage for Brooke's sake. I always thought we'd be together forever, and the idea of breaking up our family is heartbreaking. But another part of me feels like I can never trust Donald again. The things he said about me and Brooke in those emails keep replaying in my mind. I've talked to a lawyer to understand my options if I decide to pursue a divorce. The lawyer advised me to document everything and to be careful about letting Donald back into the house until I've made a decision. She also suggested I might want to consider seeking full custody of Brooke given Donald's recent behavior and apparent resentment towards fatherhood. My parents have been supportive through all of this. They've offered to help with Brooke and have told me I can stay with them if I need to. But they're also encouraging me to try to work things out with Donald, saying that marriages go through rough patches and that Brooke needs both her parents. I'm torn about what to do next. Should I give Donald one last chance? Is it worth trying marriage counseling, or is the trust too broken at this point? Is it time to consult a divorce lawyer? How do I protect Brooke through all of this? I'm also worried about Simon's continued influence. Even if Donald cuts contact for real this time, what's to stop Simon from showing up at our house again or trying to contact Donald at work? Should I be considering legal action against Simon for his role in all of this? Any advice would be greatly appreciated because I feel completely lost right now. Has anyone been through a similar situation? How did you handle it? How do you know when it's time to walk away from a marriage versus when to keep fighting for it? Update 3. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share what's happened since then. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice during this difficult time. Your words have been a source of strength for me. After much soul-searching and several counseling sessions, I decided I couldn't continue in the marriage. The trust was completely broken, and I realized I deserved better than constantly wondering if my husband was lying to me. It was a hard decision, but I know it's the right one for both Brooke and me in the long run. I consulted with a divorce lawyer and started the process of separating from Donald. It hasn't been easy, especially explaining the situation to Brooke. We've told her that Mommy and Daddy still love her very much, but we won't be living together anymore. She's been seeing a child therapist to help her process the changes in our family. Donald initially tried to convince me to give him another chance. He promised to cut all ties with Simon for real this time and even offered to move to a different city to get a fresh start. But when he realized I was serious about the divorce, his attitude changed. He became angry and bitter, accusing me of breaking up our family and trying to turn Brooke against him. We're now in the process of working out custody arrangements for Brooke. Donald is pushing for 50-50 custody, but given his past behavior and continued friendship with Simon, I'm fighting for primary custody with supervised visitation for Donald. My lawyer thinks we have a strong case, especially with the evidence of Donald's emails and his history of neglecting his family responsibilities. Unfortunately, Simon is still in the picture. Despite Donald's claims that he'd cut ties, I found out that they're still in regular contact. Simon has been encouraging Donald to fight me on everything in the divorce, from custody to division of assets. It's made the process even more stressful and contentious than it needed to be. On a positive note, Brooke and I are doing okay. She's adjusting to our new routine, and while she misses her dad, she seems more relaxed now that she's not witnessing constant arguments. I've also started therapy to work through my own feelings about the end of my marriage and to make sure I'm in the best place possible to be there for Brooke. I've gone no contact with Donald except for discussions about Brooke or the divorce proceedings. It's been hard, but it's helped me start to heal and move forward. I've also blocked Simon on all platforms and made it clear through my lawyer that all communication needs to go through proper channels. My parents have been an incredible support system through all of this. They've helped with childcare when I've needed to meet with lawyers or attend therapy sessions. They've also been a shoulder to cry on during the tough days. I've started to reconnect with old friends who I'd lost touch with during my marriage. It's been nice to rebuild those connections and to have a support system outside of my family. I've even joined a support group for single parents, which has been incredibly helpful. Financially, things are tight, but I'm managing. I've taken on some freelance work in addition to my regular job to make ends meet. It's stressful, but it's worth it to provide a stable home for Brooke. Looking back, I can see now that there were red flags in my relationship with Donald from the beginning. His dependence on Simon, his reluctance to fully commit to family life, his tendency to run from problems rather than face them head-on. I ignored these signs because I wanted to believe in our marriage and our family. But I've learned that sometimes, loving someone isn't enough if they don't respect you or prioritize your family. For now, I'm focusing on building a new life for Brooke and me. It's scary starting over at 28, but I'm also excited about the possibilities ahead. I'm rediscovering who I am outside of my role as Donald's wife, and I'm committed to being the best mother I can be to Brooke. I know there will be challenges ahead. Co-parenting with Donald won't be easy, especially with Simon still in the picture. The divorce proceedings are likely to get messier before they're resolved. And there will be days when I question whether I made the right decision. But I'm trying to stay positive and focus on the future. I'm creating a home where Brooke feels safe, loved, and secure. I'm working on myself, both in therapy and by pursuing interests I'd put aside during my marriage. And I'm slowly learning to trust my own judgment again.